Hi, welcome to Life in a Bottle, Season 3, Episode 5. I'm Kyle, back again with the 2018 King's Carey Semillon. So, let's zoom out a little bit. Where are we? We're in the United States. We're in California. We're in Santa Barbara. More specifically in the Happy Canyon region of Santa Barbara, and most specifically at the single site of the Vogelzang Vineyard. This is a side project. King's Carey is a solo side project of former Mormon James Sparks, who we know from his winemaking for Liquid Farm, who we've worked pretty closely with here at Incona's because their wines are killer. Turns out, when he goes out on his own, they are just as good, if not a little bit more unique, but still absolutely killer. So let's dive in a little bit. His solo project here emphasizes how good James is at making wine, not only in the winery, but starting in the vineyard. So he's able to work with the growers at Vogelzang Vineyard, who also is the source for Liquid Farm's Mourvedre, from which they make their rosé. That is absolutely bonkers, and I can't wait to get my hands on the new vintage of that stuff. He's able to work with these guys and narrow down an exact window to pick where you get maximum freshness and also the perfect level of ripeness, guaranteeing the alcohol level he wants and still maintaining all of the complexities that this grape has to offer. The grape is Semillon. We don't see it a ton in the States. We see it most commonly in Bordeaux blends alongside Sauvignon Blanc because, well, it just never really picked up a lot of steam in the States. But when it's made like this, it's worth every penny. So speaking of Vogelzang Vineyard, it's farmed sustainably. As I mentioned, they do work closely with the winemakers so that the fruit can be the star of the show. Winemaking is not the star here. It's not beautiful toasted oak barrels. It's beautifully grown grapes that are made in a very hands-off fashion, and the character of the grape is really allowed to shine. In the region of Happy Canyon, we've got a lot of rolling hills, a lot of gravelly soil, so ripeness comes slow. Santa Barbara is a little bit of a cooler area compared to a lot of California, especially Central Coast. But what that means is that the ripeness doesn't come at the cost of aromatic complexity and all the fragrant flavors that come in the resulting wine. He also, as I mentioned, can manage the alcohol level, which in this guy, this 100% Semillon cuvee, comes in only at 12%. So it's light and fresh, but the way he makes the wine is hands-off, but very decisive. So as far as how the wine is made, he's allowing it to ferment after a little bit of skin contact, about 8 hours. So it gets a little bit more aromatic complexity and a little bit more tannic structure to the wine. I say tannin, it's not a tannic wine, but it does have a little bit more stuffing to it. It's not like a Cabernet or anything where you're gonna feel like your lips are sticking to your teeth. It's still a bright, fresh, lovely white wine. It's super refreshing, but the texture is really fascinating. And how he gets the texture is after fermentation finishes in stainless steel, after that brief skin contact, he's allowing the wine to age for about 6 months in neutral oak barrels on the lees. So the yeast cells that fall out of the wine after fermentation finishes add another level of complexity and richness in texture, just like you would see in Muscadet or Albarino oftentimes. And those neutral oak barrels, like you would see in some white Burgundies, where there's not necessarily a ton of oak to some of them, but they do have a little bit more texture that comes through from the little bit of oxygen that can penetrate those oak barrels without imparting any oak flavors. So you're not gonna find vanilla and spice. What you are gonna find is just layers and layers of texture that make this wine more and more complex. The other thing, as far as texture is concerned, that makes this wine complex is malolactic fermentation. We see malo, as it's called, oftentimes on rich, buttery California Chardonnays, and this is not that. The malo comes across in this instance as, again, just another level of rich, creamy texture And it comes through on the nose, but not like a buttered popcorn kind of clumsiness like you can find with a lot of budget California Chardonnays. It comes across really elegantly, and it just, again, another level of creamy richness to an otherwise really bright and fresh wine. He's not making a ton of this wine. He's making about 200 cases, and of that, only a few handfuls come to Connecticut. So we got what we got, and that's all she wrote. So I encourage you to get in early on this offer. On the nose, this wine is beautifully aromatic and complex. There's a floral note that comes through, some white flower and honeysuckle. There's some clean, super oily citrus peel. There's yellow apple and ripe green pear. There's some stony mineral. It's got a lot to say, and it's super, super interesting. There's even tiny little bits of like an earthy white button mushroom. On the palate, super fresh, super bright, but as I mentioned before, that creaminess, that richness. It's a little bit like a Muscadet, a little bit like an Albarino, that roundness, that fleshiness that you can find on the palate, and then that mineral finish just goes on. It's absolutely beautiful. What would I pair this with? The first thing that comes to my mind is fish. A lot of the flavors that I just described I think would be beautiful alongside this wine. So fish, maybe a little white button mushroom, maybe a little citrus beurre blanc. I think that would be killer with this. I think it's like screaming for it. I think you could get away with chicken for sure, even pork, as long as the accoutrements are a little bit on the lighter side. I think it'd sing absolutely beautifully. I think I'd also do a little bit funkier soft cheese, nothing too salty, but I think that would work really, really nicely as well. James, crushed it again, man. I'm super excited to be able to offer this. Killing it. Cheers.